Welcome back to another explainer, everyone. Okay, let's be real for a second. Have you ever, say, bought all the supplies for a brand new hobby, mapped out this gorgeous color-coded schedule, set up your workspace absolutely perfectly, and then just never took that first step? Yeah, it's honestly one of the most relatable mysteries of human behavior. We see highly intelligent, incredibly driven people meticulously plan out every single detail of a project, and yet they frequently fail to actually execute it. So today, we're unpacking the fascinating psychology from our source material to figure out exactly why our brains kind of betray us right at the starting line. Okay, let's dive into this.
So why do we plan perfectly but never start? Let's actually do a quick mental check right now. Have you ever felt completely exhausted by a project you haven't even begun? Like you've got the spreadsheets, the outlines, the vision boards, the whole shebang, but you've made absolutely zero real-world progress. It's a deeply frustrating experience, isn't it? Well, let's figure out exactly what's going wrong beneath the surface here.
Section 1. The Continuous Planning Trap. Stuck in Preparation.
At the heart of this is the trap of perfect planning with zero execution. You know, what the research tells us is that this problem is almost never about a lack of desire, and it absolutely isn't laziness. Actually, it's a very specific, deeply ingrained psychological loop. We just get caught in this state of perpetual preparation. Look, we've all been there, right? Spending 3 hours color-coding a study schedule and feeling so productive that we just slam the laptop shut without reading a single page. We convince ourselves that we're just getting ready, gathering more info, optimizing our strategy. But in reality, we're trapped in this comfortable, safe little bubble, a space that doesn't demand the vulnerability, the risk of failure, or the raw, messy effort of taking actual action. Let's move to Section 2 and see how this builds. The illusion of progress. Confusing thoughts. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the internal trickery at play here. When you sit down and plan perfectly, your brain actually fires off reward signals. It literally cannot distinguish between vividly imagining success and actually achieving it. And this is exactly what we mean by confusing thinking with progress. Your brain is actively tricking you into feeling a false sense of accomplishment just for thinking really intensely about the work. It's essentially like your brain is cashing the check before you've even done the job. The research gives us a really vital insight here. Imagining success gives the brain a false sense of achievement. Think about how powerful that mechanism is. When you're sitting there vividly daydreaming about crossing the finish line, launching that successful business, or finally publishing that novel, your brain is basically throwing a little victory party. You experience a literal, chemical false high. You feel successful, competent, victorious, all without having done a single drop of the required hard work. So this creates a very specific, almost predictable failure loop. First, we plan meticulously. We map the whole thing out perfectly. Second, we vividly imagine the success of that flawless plan. Third, we feel that hit of false achievement, that dopamine rush we were just talking about. And finally, step 4, because we already feel so accomplished and satisfied, we just fail to start. It's a fascinating paradox, really, where a totally positive intention, like the genuine desire to do well, ultimately leads to a complete failure to launch. And this brilliantly illustrates the massive disconnect between these two states, imagining success versus actual execution. Look, imagining feels effortless, it's safe, and it's highly rewarding. But actual execution? That's difficult, unpredictable, often messy, and it takes real, tangible time. The brain gets perfectly satisfied with the easy fantasy. Once it's feasted on those cheap rewards of imagination, it just drops the motivation you need to face the harsh, demanding reality of execution. But we really have to address the darker side of this false high, because eventually that euphoria wears off and it leads to an inevitable, exhausting crash.
Which brings us to Section 3, Mental Energy Drain, the Overthinking Toll.
The truth is, overthinking acts as a literal energy vampire before the work even begins. I want you to visualize your brain like a smartphone battery. When you're endlessly planning, tweaking, and obsessing over every little microscopic detail of a project, it's exactly like having dozens of heavy, power-hungry apps running continuously in the background. Your battery is rapidly draining away, even if the screen is off and you appear to be doing nothing. By the time you finally tell yourself it's time to execute the real work, well, your internal reserves are already completely depleted.
Consider how this breaks down. A massive 90% of daily mental energy can be consumed entirely by overthinking and planning. That leaves a measly 10% for the actual work. So the crucial point is this: you aren't just imagining that you're tired, you actually are, physically and mentally exhausted. This proves exactly why after a really long, intense session of just thinking about your goals, you feel way too drained to lift a single finger to start them. You basically spend all your energy preparing for the race, leaving absolutely nothing for the run itself. Which brings us to our final and perhaps most provocative question. If thinking is draining your energy, what is one thing you can do today without planning? I want to leave you with that thought to challenge your own habits. The psychology from our source material is incredibly clear here. The planning trap is real, the illusion of progress is deceptive, and the energy drain is a physical reality. So how are you going to break this cycle today? Don't plan the answer, just do it. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep pushing forward, and most importantly, start doing.